Greetings all, I'm back. This isn't the regular Bull City Hangout where I tell you what's happening today in Durham. I did that show already, but I'm back because I had invited my friend Curtis Brooks to join me and then forgot to mention to him, I forgot to remind him that for the month of January and the first week of February, Bull City Hangout is on at 11, big series of workshops that I've been attending, which were, scheduled at noon. So he very graciously, he forgave me, and he's here. So we're going to talk now. Curtis Brooks is from It's Not Rocket Science Life Coaching for Men. And he's having a very special conversation on Facebook Live for men called Men Are Hurting Too. So let's bring on Curtis and talk about that. Hey, Curtis, how are you?
I'm doing well, Pat. Thank you. Thank you for having me. You actually did a special show just for me, so I really appreciate that, Pat.
Well, this is really important because I shouldn't say everybody, I shouldn't say this, but a lot of people feel that men, for whatever reason, and I'm sure you know and can explain to us, don't look after themselves the way they should. I know my dad didn't because he took really good care of us, and of course, Mom, but he rarely went to the doctor, rarely. And he rarely dealt with his challenges because he always put family first, which is admirable. But why don't you tell me if that's really admirable? I'm not sure if it is or not.
Well, I mean, it absolutely is admirable. I think that is a duty that a lot of us as men, we have that duty, or we have a sense of duty in regards to taking care of our families. So it's definitely admirable, and it should be considered by many other men, and that's not always the case. But I think for men, it's just, it's more than just the working piece of it. It's our mental state that is often overlooked, if you will, or we overlook our mental state. And I think it has a lot to do with that old saying, men don't what? Men don't cry. So unfortunately, that has been the buildup, and that has been the backup, unfortunately, and pardon my expression now, but that has been a lot of what we as men are dealing with. And some of us are more expressive than others. And even in the seas that we are expressing ourselves, it is limited, if you will, not like women. Absolutely not like women. I think there's a lot we can learn from women in regards to expressing ourselves. And it's not always the case that women are expressing themselves as well, but for the most part, women do have a pretty good grip on expressing themselves and sharing those different things that are just, paining them, or the challenges they're going through. And men don't often do that. And
we're allowed to cry, and also we tend to turn to each other. Now, I don't know. I know there's man talk in the barbershops. I don't know if they get vulnerable or not, but I don't know. Do men tend to turn to each other or in the barbershop? Are they just hanging out, or are they actually talking about personal things? Some of us want to know.
So, right. Well, for men in the barbershop, again, I guess it depends on a trust factor. A trust factor for men or with men is absolutely huge. But as far as the barbershop, oftentimes, at least times I've been gone, I haven't gone to barbershop in a while now, but for the time, I think historically it's been, we do get into the deep conversations, but it's not necessarily those vulnerable moments. It's men talking to men in a way that we know how to talk to them, or their lack, or know how to talk to each other, or their lack of. So I think that's the challenge, but we don't often get vulnerable about our own challenges, mistakes that we've made. And if there is talk about that, you would actually more hear from young people, the young people saying something And the older people say, "Now, why'd you want to go and do that? That was just stupid." You know?
Mhm.
But that's
Oh,
just again, that's unfortunately that's just the
mhm,
conversation, or at least that's how we as men sometimes talk to each other. But you more often hear a younger person being more vulnerable. But obviously, as the younger people get older and just have dealt with life,
mhm.
we kind of clam up.
Now, how
You know,
can it benefit men to open up more? Or because I have read that men often feel that that's a sign of weakness to admit challenges or even that they've made mistakes, a vulnerability that's considered really weak by many men, not by
it
me,
it
by many
is in a
men.
lot. I think, but here's the reality of that. I think, and oftentimes, we look at women for just a moment in regards to when when a lot of times when women do things, or just people in general, we do things, or at least we are set out to do something, and we make a mistake, and it's very often that people are gonna, we're gonna come across people say, "Oh yeah, I made a mistake," and blah blah, whatever the case may be. But the reality of it is, for men, it is considered a weakness, and to a degree with women as well. But again, women have that piece that men need to again learn from, that expression piece where we need to talk about things and get things off our chest, because ultimately it's not just a men thing. We're going to talk more about this later on in our show, but it's not just a man thing. And when I say that, meaning that it also affects the family.
Oh,
It affects your family. So I think sometimes we want to isolate that and say, hey, this is just for men, or this is what men are dealing with, or men don't communicate. But again, if we look closer, drill deeper down into that, is that if the men aren't communicating, not necessarily just to each other, the likelihood of them communicating to their wives, their girlfriends, even to their children
mhm.
is very little. So if none at all. So
Well, it helped me a lot when my dad would. He didn't. Well, I know he had a very, very difficult child. In fact, he separated from his mom and grandma. Well, his father left his mother while she was pregnant, and
mm,
then because this was the 1920s,
right,
it's not like they had welfare or anything. They actually left my dad behind and went to Chicago to find work. So Pop wasn't even with his mom and grandmother for a few years. And I, even as a child, I could see the they had a loyalty because they did reunite, and they
mhm,
my dad was my grandmother's only child, so they were close, but I could still tell that there was something missing. They worked on their loyalty very hard, but
right,
I
right,
could tell that there was something missing in terms of closeness because he didn't hug her for the
mm,
first few years, and he had difficulties and challenges. But it helped me as a kid that he explained some of these things to me
right,
as we grew up, the different challenges he had as a kid, and that helped us see him more as a full person and not as just the demagogue father figure. We
right,
got to
right,
see him as a vulnerable person who had
right.
challenges, and I think that helped us a lot. It helped us an
Absolutely.
awful lot. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the other piece of it too is that oftentimes as men, we just don't have examples, or at least I won't say we don't have examples, because our fathers are our examples, and thankfully for the fathers. But the challenge is sometimes, if we want to take things and relationships and life to the next level, guess what? Oftentimes we have to go beyond what we see, and so we may not have those examples for a lot of us. And I think society, the movies, are a good thing, like Leave It to Beaver kind of thing, that just kind of comes to mind, where we like to
Mhm.
portray that idea of what a father looks like, or what a mom looks like, or what the typical family looks like. Nothing so
Mhm.
serious, but just occasionally, just that kind of that 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 menace behavior, if you will, but nothing so
Mhm,
serious. And I think
mhm.
that we've allowed we've allowed the movies and the different shows to paint pictures as what what a family looks like, what a father looks like, what a mother looks like, and I think we can easily in a lot of those different characters we can find ourselves playing those roles, if you will, and that in most cases is not a reality.
Yeah. So, what are you going to discuss today? You're going to have a very special Facebook Live conversation at 2. I know you're in Texas, but it's 2:30 my time, Eastern time.
Correct, and 1:30 Central Time and 11:30 Pacific Time. So, yeah, I'm actually met a woman on Instagram. I shared a post on Instagram, and she liked it, and I went to go check out her post or something like that, and so she was talking about this particular subject, and I thought it was very interesting because we don't hear a lot of people talking about it, a lot of women talking about it, and so
Mhm,
I just really just was drawn to her conversation,
mhm,
not so because it fits what I'm doing, but for the fact that this is a conversation that we all need to have. And so we
mhm.
talked for a little bit, and I was sharing with her because after watching her video, and by the way, her name is Ashley Sanderson. Again, that's Ashley
Okay.
Sanderson. So after listening to Ashley's video, it just made me think about some things, and it was just very profound. Again, just we don't hear this conversation a lot from women, and I think that at the end of the day, there's some things that we have to deal with. And again, as I mentioned earlier, is that it's not just a man
Mhm.
thing because it affects the entire household.
Sure.
And when the household is disarray, it's hard for the family to function as a unit. I'll put it that
Mhm.
way. So,
I
but
wonder, when it comes to families, I don't know if my parents really talked about this. They just seem to work together nicely, but do they really discuss in advance usually the roles that they'll play?
well, I don't,
'Cause how do you know your family's in disarray if you haven't set it up?
right, right. And let me say this to clarify that statement. I think obviously for each family we have our own set of uh, rules, if you will, and kind
Mhm,
of use it very loosely. And it's kind of one of those things that what works within our family is what works. But when we take that information or things that we've heard mom say, or things that we've heard dad do or say, whatever the case might be, at least from our family environment, when we take that information out into the world,
mhm,
people are looking at us like, where the heck did you get that from? And so there are these different things that we gather from our families that work and don't work. And
mhm,
it will make us go back to the drawing board and rethink some things. And I think that's where we find out, well, wait a minute. This isn't really functional in a way that it could be, more or less,
mhm,
that we're working together, we're working as a unit. So again, I don't think it's necessarily anything that's any written rule, but it's just how those for all of our families, we all have those different idiosyncrasies that take place within a family structure, and that yet we have gone along with the program for so long to the point where it seems normal, but then we grow up and become adults. We begin dating and experience life, and we find out that those things just don't work in regards to having they may or may not work in regards to having a relationship that's moving forward, a personal or professional relationship that's growing in a right direction, I should say. So
mhm. Yeah, not all families have the same parameters, do they? You very fine. It's really funny when you do visit other kids when you're a kid and you realize your family's so different. Sometimes
absolutely,
in a good way,
absolutely.
sometimes in a bad way, but it's
Yeah.
quite the learning experience. So
Mhm.
during today's show, is it going to be so is it going to be you and Ashley talking like we are now, or is it going to be a group sort of thing where you invite the viewers in, or how's it going to work?
Well, yeah, actually, yeah, it's gonna be where you have this set up here, you and I are talking, but we are gonna be taking questions, and I'll, do my best to try and manage it all because I'm doing the switching and all that stuff, so I'll try and
Mm,
not too much switching, but for the
mm.
most part, it'll be
And
Ashley and I.
and by switching, Curtis,
Oh,
he
sorry.
engineers other people's shows, so he's used to doing the sound effects and switching from cameras and showing the pictures and doing all that technical stuff.
Right,
So that's what he means by switching.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so
By
for
the
the
way, oh, go
mhm.
ahead. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, I was just saying, just for the most part, it'll be Ashley and I on screen, just kind of going at this conversation together, and she's going to be sharing her experiences. I'll be sharing mine, and
Mm,
it's going to be a pretty good show. I'm really excited about it. And she asked in a question, it's like, so what, how long will the show be? And I just messaged her back. I said, you know what? We're just going to share. We're going to get personal, and because we want people to learn. That's just bottom line. We want to have these conversations, and I think much like you said, what your father shared with you,
mm.
it really kind of helped you to see what your father was going through, and just understand him better as a person, as a human being, and not like you said, or like you said, not to see him as this demagogue, as a father of a father. So,
Actually, even though he was a very, what you would say, strong father,
mhm,
um, he allowed us to, how can I put it? It took the pressure off in a way. I don't think he was aiming for this, but
sure,
on television, your father has to be the strongest, the smartest, the best, the richest, driving the biggest car, and all that sort of thing. And when you're vulnerable with your kids realize you don't have to be everything.
yes,
You
yes,
don't
yeah,
have to be tops at everything. Um, Pop he was the goofiest. He was a great dad, even though his
mhm,
dad abandoned him, and his dad
mhm,
really missed out.
right,
But
right,
Pop did crazy stuff. He would stand in the middle of the yard with the water hose. I know he looked insane, but he wanted us to have a skating rink in the winter. So he would
mm,
stand out there with a water hose, freezing the backyard just for us. Now that's
oh,
crazy.
cool, oh, cool, oh,
But
cool,
yeah, that was cool. And then we would do crazy stuff. He'd take us. Remember Midway Plaisance? That's in between Woodlawn and Hyde Park. Midway
uh,
Plaisance, 60th Street in Chicago. It's
mhm,
it's a block wide. Um, Basically, it was supposed to have been a channel where the Chicago River would empty into Lake Michigan and work.
mm,
So instead, in Hyde Park, there is this block long, the series of empty space, grassy space, that pretty much nobody does anything with. I think they have a skating rink there,
mm,
and I don't know what they do. It's just kind of like empty space. So a section of Midway Plaisance would be frozen in the winter, and Pop would take us there at midnight to go
right,
skating. We have the whole
right,
skating rink to ourselves.
mm,
So crazy
that's
stuff. So yeah, so you don't have to be perfect. You've seen those commercials. You don't have to be perfect to be a parent,
yes,
but all you
yes.
have to do is just to do things for your kids. You know.
Absolutely, absolutely, and communicate. That's going to be
Mhm,
hugely important. Much like how you were saying moments ago, how when your father began to share with you different
mhm.
things, you could understand differently now, as opposed to how you may have perceived previously. But so communication is a huge piece, and
Huge.
yeah, absolutely, very huge. And so, unfortunately, not enough of us as men do that in a sense of uh, again, there's communicating, and then there is communicating in a sense where we are not just in a sense the niceties. Okay, well, it's your turn to talk. No, what I mean by communicating, at least for men in this regard, is being vulnerable. Being
Mhm.
vulnerable, and I think that it's just absolutely going to be huge. huge, because that's where the healing begins. That's where the healing
Exactly.
begins. And
Mhm.
ultimately, that is the goal: is to help men heal. Because when we can communicate, we can get it off our chest, and we can also hear a different perspective. Because sometimes we are just, things take place in life, and then I'm just speaking in general for men and women alike. But
Mhm.
sometimes things happen in life, we just simply file them wrong. We can
Mhm.
place them in the wrong compartment in our mind, if you will. And
Hmm. Like
perhaps,
what?
I mean, it could be anything. It could be, for instance, like an example that one of my former pastors had given a while ago. He, and again, this could be anything, but the example that he had given was how a person will see his pastor. Let's say a person sees his pastor, or a person who maybe they're that's highly regarded, and this person is sitting down at a restaurant or something at a table. And so the example he was given, that this pastor was sitting down at the table with some friends, whatever, and the pastor was uh, uh, drinking water, but the water was in a cocktail glass with a straw and a lime.
Uh-oh.
You,
Not
you
the
get what
right
I'm saying?
look.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Not the right look. And so I think as a whole, sometimes we can just, it's not always what it is, what we
Mhm.
see it to be. And
Mhm.
And obviously, that was a kind of an overly simplified example, but the point of it is that oftentimes there are just things that take place in life, and we can uh, perhaps even be in a discussion with someone, or perhaps a disagreement, and someone says something, and we've taken it the wrong way, and so we
Mhm.
have disconnected perhaps ourselves from this person, and they're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And not to, to our I guess misunderstanding, we've kind of just permitted that information, or at least allowed that information, or filed that information in the wrong
Mhm.
compartment, and it's not exactly what the person meant.
And actually, you
And we
can destroy a person's reputation. Because my mom was a high school teacher, and she used to drink water in class. It's really funny. You should tell us the story about this pastor, because my mom would drink water in class, and the kids would talk behind her back, talking about how she was drinking.
mm,
Drinking. I
right,
can't very. The clear alcohol, whatever that would be,
right,
whiskey, whatever's clear. I don't know, vodka. But yeah, and that could have really ruined her reputation,
absolutely,
because that's an
absolutely.
ugly thing to say about somebody else. But yeah,
Mhm.
so this starts again at 2:30 Eastern. So how does it work? Do people sign up? Do they go to your website or?
Actually, it's going to be just on Facebook here, and so you can visit my website here. Well, I'll actually put it, or not website, but I'll put my Facebook link in the comments afterwards. But
Okay,
yes,
good.
going to be here on Facebook, and also on my business page.
Mhm.
And I'll put, again, just either one of those links will work, but I'll put the links in the comments after our broadcast here, and you'll be able to watch the show and ask questions or type in questions, and we'll do our best, to my best, to bring your questions on screen, and we can address those questions. Or again, but first, obviously, we're gonna kind of dive into the conversation, and at some point,
Mhm.
we'll open up the show or the broadcast for questions.
Awesome. So two more questions. I want to respect your time. I know you need to get ready. Um,
Absolutely.
is this men's only, or is this for?
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great point, and I think you mentioned it earlier. It is absolutely not men's only, and, matter of fact, Ashley is a woman, and so,
That's
this is
why I'm
coming.
asking. I was like, I thought this was a
Yeah.
man. Oh,
So this is coming from, absolutely a woman's perspective, and I think to some degree that, regardless of what we've gone through in life, there comes a time where, where we have this epiphany, and obviously, it may or may happen for some, and others it may not. But I think for some of us, there's come a time where we've had this epiphany and say, wait a minute, you know, uh, I'm not the only one. hurting. And it's nice to
Mm.
hear that come from it's nice to hear that come from a woman, because oftentimes, again, and this is what something Ashley said I thought was very interesting, because if it were me coming on a show and saying men are hurting too, I don't think it would necessarily go over so well.
Really?
But for the fact, yeah, I do. I don't necessarily, not to say that it's not important
Mm.
to hear from a man, but I think that there's a misconception that almost kind of like last week, or I think a couple of weeks ago, I did a blog, and I can't remember the title of it now, but I think when I was writing, I wrote something to, or at least a picture I created when I was writing was
Mhm.
just writing in a way that how a person is talking and they have said certain things, and eventually they painted themselves in a corner.
Mm.
And I think men sometimes we've done just that. We've painted ourselves in a corner, and now
Mm.
we need to get
Get out of it
so
somehow.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think that we've tried to be a lot of things to a lot of people. Uh, our families that you mentioned earlier with your dad,
Mhm.
and it's a lot of weight. It is a lot of weight,
Mm.
and perhaps it's this, as my friend would say, this trophy that sometimes women are looking for, that no one knows, but just this trophy that if I do it all
Mhm.
by myself, I'll get this trophy that again no one really
There's
knows about it. But from one woman to another woman, they
Mhm.
talk about the trophy sometimes. But
Mhm.
so
Oh, my last question. Tell us a little bit about It's Not Rocket Science, your life coaching for men. What does that entail? Is it like being a counselor or what?
well, yeah, it is essentially life coaching, and life coaching for men. And this has been a space that actually I've needed to be in for a long time, and I found myself being preoccupied with so many other different things. And finally, I just said, you know what, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to be doing, and at least, you know, get out there and make this thing happen. So that being said, initially for me, I was trying to cast this wide net, and so I kind of brought myself back in with a much more narrow net, and that is working with men and coaching men. So uh, again, it's not rocket science. Coaching is life coaching for men, and basically we're helping men communicate from brokenness to wholeness. And
Mhm.
that brokenness, again, it not only affects them obviously, but affects their children, their wives, their jobs, their just communication in society. What do I do? What's my role in society?
Mhm.
And or how society sees them, and how society sees them, unfortunately, sometimes is the way we see ourselves. And if we can't get a grip on how we see ourselves, be comfortable with that first and foremost, and know that society in itself will change, it's, over time, and it'll change back to something else. It'll change back yet to something else. But ideally, that's what I
Nice.
do, coaching men back to healthiness and to wholeness.
Awesome. What makes you a good life coach? I mean, I can tell you're a good listener, you're very articulate. But tell us where you're coming from in terms of being a good life coach.
That's a great question, Pat.
I just want to
For
say
me,
hello to Tachi. She's
oh, hey, Chachi, what's going on? For me, being a good life coach is, as you said moments ago, just being a good listener and being attentive. But it also means that I'm vulnerable as well.
hmm.
It also means that because I am vulnerable, I can chime in. I can uh, listen from a different perspective that I would not normally listen to. Because here's the thing: in order to be of use to anyone, it's not the person who is perfect; it's the person who is broken, and yet,
Mm.
by the grace of God, brings it all back together and uses the brokenness to teach, learn, to give new insight, to give different perspectives. So that's what it's about. It's not about the uh, unreality of television, I should say. And I'm speaking of the Leave It to Beaver kind of thing going on. And so, and those things were nice, they were entertaining, but the reality of it is that there's a lot to be said about brokenness, because brokenness is vulnerability. But if I can, as a coach, help my client get back to wholeness, and that there's nothing wrong with their brokenness. Brokenness just means that you're human.
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. Sounds great. And Lenora, thank you so much for your nice comment. So, folks, Curtis is unable to access the show notes while he's on Facebook. So when this ends, Curtis will go ahead and then put the link that we need to join the conversation, which will be in a couple of hours, 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 your time because you're in Texas, and then you said 11:30 Pacific time. So women and men are welcome, and I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. And I think it's needed because very often, sometimes when men are vulnerable, I've seen this where men are vulnerable and then they get pounced on, and then they retreat because they accidentally showed their hand, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And it would be nice to be able to actually talk.
Well, absolutely. And, I think that's just the other piece of it is, so it's not just about communicating or how society sees us, or trying to uphold that, that figure, if you will, whatever that may be. But it's also, as I said earlier, it's communicating with our wives, our spouses, our girlfriends, or our kids. And as you said with your father, how he shared with you, and he had a vulnerable moment or two or three, but nevertheless, he was being vulnerable, and you learned that much more from his vulnerability, that brokenness that he shared with you, that he had the courage to share with you. So I think that that is just another show in itself in regards to just then getting to a place where we can trust individuals in our life or in our space to be vulnerable, and not feel that it's we're, as you said, we're going to be pounced upon.
Well, I can't wait. I do hope that I can join you and not join you on camera, of course, but be in the audience. So again, folks, we'll be putting the link as soon as this is over, and then we'll be able to join this conversation. Will this be the first of many conversations, or is this a test run, or what?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is actually going to be the first of many. And I was talking with a friend of mine earlier, and so she was thinking that it was a good idea to really kind of just keep this going. Men are hurting too, because this is a much needed conversation.
I wonder if eventually it'll evolve into something else. Now, my friend 𝗕𝗢𝗓 Wilson, she is a sharing type conversation thing, but I guess because people don't want to have other people see them as they talk about their pain, I can't remember what platform she's using, but it's not Facebook Live. It's like private, so that what is said in the room stays in the room. Do you think eventually you'll have something like that only, so they can really get down to the nitty gritty?
Absolutely. Well, in fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to share about this program or conversation, another conversation I have coming up on the 23rd of February. It's called The Huddle, and during that particular conversation, it is absolutely private. We are respecting men of different backgrounds, and what they have to share is absolutely private. And so that particular discussion is
The
for men
Huddle.
only. I'm sorry?
That's a brilliant name. The Huddle.
The Huddle,
I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
Because sometimes I recognize when I happen to be in an area and men are talking, sometimes I realize let them have their man talk and I don't butt in. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Because I like
yeah.
how men, at least black men, talk with each other. I really love that. I don't know what it is, but it's a beautiful thing to see. But sometimes I know to just, let them have their little space and
Right.
let them
Right.
have their conversation and just gracefully bow out. Now, Lenora's looking forward to tuning in, and Tachi wants to know what time again. So I know Tachi's in Florida, Eastern, so 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central, 11:30. So, and I love that the huddle. That is so brilliant.
Thank
That's
you.
going to
Thank
be
you.
nice.
Thank you.
So you can drop by anytime and let us know when so the huddle hasn't happened yet. That's a
Yeah. The
development,
huddle's,
later development.
yeah. Actually, I'm just in the process of promoting the huddle right now, and or at least not now, but I'm in that process of doing the promoting period. And so that's going to take place on the February 23rd at 7:30 Central Time, 8:30 Eastern Time, and then 5:30 Pacific Time. So yeah, that's going to take place. And so right now, registration is open for men. So if you know any men who could definitely uh, like to be a part of this and get some things off their chests and talk about some things and find out how we can kind of look at those things from a different perspective and shed some light on some different things, please invite them to be a part of the huddle. That's the
Awesome.
huddle, February 23rd at 7:30 Central Time, 8:30 Eastern Time, and 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Curtis Brooks. Curtis
Okay.
is from It's Not Rocket Science Life Coaching for Men. And I guess I'll see you at 2:30.
Absolutely. Looking forward to you being a part of the show. Thank you.
Absolutely. You take care.
All right.
Okay, folks. Well, that was kind of abrupt. Sorry about that. I'm kind of clumsy sometimes. But anyway, thanks again, Curtis, for being on the show. And folks, I guess we'll all see Curtis at 2:30 Eastern. It's a beautiful day. And this is a very special edition of Bull City Hangout, even though I know Curtis isn't in the Bull City, but I am. So there you go. I'll see you tomorrow. Want to watch Bull City Hangout, the usual regular edition where I tell you what's happening today in Durham, North Carolina. That will be at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. With that, have a beautiful day. Ciao for now.